record this, and I just want to introduce our featured speakers today, Sarah Wertz and Ethan Wittrock, both employees of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University in central Minnesota. So I will stop sharing, and Ethan, I will let you go ahead and share your screen, and you guys can take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. As Beth mentioned, I'm Ethan Wittrock. I'm an instructional technologist here at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, and I'll let Sarah introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Sarah Wertz, and I'm the social sciences librarian here at College of St. Benedict, St. John's University. We want to welcome you to our session, The For Against Neutral Assignment, a collaboration between librarians and instructional technologists. In this session, we will discuss how we designed a single session technology assignment as a way for faculty to introduce aspects of information literacy to their students. We first though want to thank Minitex for having us be a part of their series, Media Landscapes. Thank you. So the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University are Catholic liberal arts colleges located approximately 5 miles apart in rural central Minnesota. The College of St. Benedict for women is located in St. Joseph, and St. John's University for men is located in Collegeville. Each college maintains its own campus, resident hall, athletic program, and traditions. However, the colleges offer a joint academic program and are served by a joint library with buildings on each campus. Combined enrollment for St. Ben St. John's is approximately 3,500 students, all of whom are undergraduates except for a small graduate theology school at SJU, as well as a small graduate school in nursing. So prior to March 2018, instructional technology was known as media services and was a part of the libraries. And they would help faculty and staff set up with event setups, material ordering, reserving materials, and very little teaching though was done with technology. In July 2015, a digital media support specialist was hired to reach out to faculty to discuss assigning video production projects to the students. These sessions were originally taught by media services staff, but with the influx of classes in the last few years, librarians were asked to get involved. Between 2017 and 2018, media services made the transition to become instructional technology and became part of IT services. Since March 2018, librarians have committed time to learning video, podcasts, and 3D printer technology so they could assist in teaching media sessions. Information literacy, however, had been a key piece missing from the sessions, which everyone felt needed to be incorporated. Each party was committed to learning from each other, but also in supporting each other while changes to teaching and classroom structure occurred.
Our instructional technology team is made up of 2 distinctive teams. The first team focuses on classroom and AV support and is an evolution of our original media services department, focusing on audiovisual technology and the needs for the university events, classrooms, and conference spaces. The second team within instructional technology is a group of instructional technologists that focus on integrating technology-related assignments into the coursework. This group also works more directly with librarians and faculty to partner on the design and development of assignments that include video projects, audio podcasts, 3D design and printing, augmented and virtual reality, and others. Instructional technology is part of our larger IT services department here on campus. Instructional technologists have worked with librarians and faculty to develop a range of technology assignments over the past few years, often based upon the unique needs of an individual class. But as those needs continued to grow, there became noticeable limitations to the number of courses that we could work with in a semester, partially due to the limitations of facilities, professional staff, scheduling conflicts, software licenses, hardware, and other equipment. We began to streamline the process by using more blended learning resources and encouraging flipped classroom approach to instruction regarding training on specific tools, especially editing software. This approach allowed us to condense support of a course assignment to approximately 1 to 2 weeks, or 4 to 6 in-class sessions. Along with the video tutorials used to flip the in-person instruction, we also preloaded portable hard drives with a variety of resources and media assets to shorten the project duration when working on a video project and audio podcast. Students have access to collections of licensed music, sound effects, and instructional stock footage and photos so that they can have a turnaround process of a project that could be noticeably shortened. This worked for a time, but the need continued to grow. Our team and partnering librarians began reducing our involvement with semester-long courses, sunsetting some of our older assignments that required significant human resources and access to facilities for longer periods of time. Instead, we adopted shorter assignments that required heavy support for just a few sessions and relied less on access to specialized equipment and the media production facilities. We also began offering consistent hands-on assistance to our video studio and with the support of student employees. And we adopted an open lab approach to our media editing spaces so that the classes could continue to be top priority. But if any available stations were open, users would be allowed to come in and use the space if they did not disrupt the class or the instruction that day. This was a noticeable shift from classes that would reserve the entire space exclusively for their students and instructional sessions throughout the entirety of the semester. Instructional technologists and librarians had reached a point where the existing assignments, where shortening the number of sessions any further was going to noticeably lower the quality of the finished results. This was in opposition to evolving learning outcomes by the faculty who wanted their students to develop confidence using specific technology skill sets, and also was counterintuitive to the attempt to help students create high-quality portfolio content or artifacts that they could use to apply for internships and jobs. Instead of reducing the assignments any further, we began encouraging an increase in overall production quality by recommending a review session toward the end of any of our projects that were planned for distribution or to be posted as finished artifacts. This made it difficult to imagine reducing the number of sessions any further and called for a new approach in order to find a scalable option that could reach new classes and underrepresented majors. This brought us to 2019 and a charge from the libraries and instructional technology for our team to develop an assignment or assignments or exercises that could be resemble a single session library instructional session. This assignment would ultimately need to be a reimagined version of what we were currently doing, since it could not be scaled down any further in its current form. Flipped classroom model was still required for sake of instruction involving the tool or software, but the assignment that involved an active learning activity or gamification of a very basic exercise that was not heavily graded or meant for distribution was one of the earliest ideas and ultimately led to a conversation about a single session video assignment focused on post-production editing, where the pre-recorded content would be made available on portable hard drives for the students. The idea was focused on all students having access to the same exact pre-recorded content, but the way that students would choose to selectively edit the piece or the specific angle or motivation that they use to craft the message would be the focus of this new single session video assignment.
Librarians recognized that library instructions were changing. While we were incorporating different types of technology like Poll Everywhere and Prezi to help with engaging students, no longer were we going into classrooms to teach technology like how to use a database. We were changing our instructions to engage students to understand how to critically select sources. While this was something we emphasized, it had become even more important due to fake news and many people not trusting news sources. We wanted students to understand bias, authority, and purpose of the sources. With scholarly sources, we've been discussing with students who gets published and how the students' research might not be inclusive. Last year, our campus curriculum changed, and instead of being the common curriculum, it became the integrations curriculum. The integrations curriculum, students learn how to make connections between their academic coursework, campus life experiences, and their own life and world around them. Integrated learning, the ability to see relationships among the arts, the sciences, and the humanities, is believed to be a valuable real-life skill that makes our graduates highly sought after by employers and the nation's top graduate programs. The biggest change from the common curriculum to the integrations curriculum was removing the first year seminar, or FYS, which was a one-year course designed to help students with their writing, but also to help them get acclimated to college life in a acclimated to college life. Students at FYS wrote an approximately 10-page research paper in their spring semester. Learning Foundations, which replaced FYS, focuses solely on writing, yet removed the research paper component and instead focus on 3 short essays. The type of sources used depends on the professor's requirements. One big difference between FYS and Learning Foundations is that librarians are required to have 1 library instruction, whereas with FYS, professors were strongly encouraged to have a librarian, but it wasn't required. Instructional technology team would go to many FYS classes and teach students how to make video projects. The projects were video essays with an academic component, with the exception of one faculty who had his students create movies. Sometimes faculty would have students do podcasts as well. With the new integrations curriculum, it was no longer sustainable to do a media project simply because, as Ethan explained earlier, it required several days to create. Days that faculty were not willing to give since the class has changed to a strictly writing course. In the summer of 2019, Ethan and I were tasked with creating assignments with the new integrations curriculum in mind. One assignment we created was a for against neutral assignment. The goal of the assignment was to have students gain information literacy skills, but also develop their critical thinking skills when reviewing sources, whether for a research paper or from the news. The information literacy skills we tackled were evaluating sources, fake news, and bias. The assignments had students take news clips and manipulate them to create clips that were either for, against, or neutral. The goal was not to demonstrate how easy it was to manipulate news or images, or to make them feel that they can't trust sources, but instead the process allowed students to have a deeper understanding of fake news and bias. It helped them to realize that they don't need to trust, that they help them realize that while they can trust sources, they need to use their critical thinking skills and learn from several sources instead of relying on just one.
Since the idea for the for against neutral assignment was new and untested, we were interested in a prototype or first run structured as an exercise rather than a graded assignment. Professor Ellen Block, who teaches a transnational anthropology class here at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, regularly has her students produce video documentaries as an assignment for the class completed over the span of a semester. In spring of 2020, before the pandemic hit, we piloted the For Against Neutral project in her class as a training exercise and the precursor to a larger documentary assignment. Students were divided into groups and given pre-recorded video and audio content. They were then given the assigned perspectives and asked to selectively edit a short piece together to advocate for or against a topic. Some groups were also assigned to remain neutral and were asked to present the information as balanced as possible. When reviewing the finished projects, the assigned perspectives for each group remained a secret, and the students were asked to guess the intended tilt of each piece. Here's a brief informational video that includes a testimonial from Professor Ellen Block about this assignment and the role that it played in her class. In spring semester of 2020, about a month before the closure due to COVID-19, Instructional Technology and the Libraries worked with a class on their very first For Against Neutral assignment. In this specific case, we used the assignment as an exercise to teach and prove editing skill sets for a larger assignment.
My name is Ellen Block, and I am an associate professor in the sociology department, and I'm an anthropologist. I use this assignment for my transnational anthropology class. Over the course of the whole semester, the students make a documentary film that gets presented on Scholarship and Creativity Day. And it's a class that looks at transnational people's experiences. It's a lot about migrating groups that are present in Minnesota. What they're trying to do is tell a story about some transnational experience or issue.
Before they started working on their documentary, Students took part in the For Against Neutral assignment as an exercise to test their editing skill sets. Using the Vanderbilt Television News Archive available through the library's database collections, we were able to use Iraq War coverage as the basis for the assignment. Students were asked to selectively edit the clips in a way that appeared for, against, or remaining neutral to the question of the justification of the invasion of Iraq based upon the presence of nuclear weapons.
David, as you know, the Vice President of the United States and Secretary of State Powell say, we still don't know the end result. We could still find these weapons.
Well, Tom, let me explain how I came to a different conclusion. If there are large stockpiles of weapons, there must have been a production process which required plants, required people, and it would have produced documentation. But we have seen nothing that would indicate large-scale production.
And what that shows them is that any sort of body of footage, like the ones that they're taking for their own projects, can be turned to tell a narrative in multiple different ways. And it's really important to understand that because the students have a responsibility to represent the people that they are telling this story about in the way that would feel true to them.
Using very basic editing techniques, students were able to change the specific message of each individual interview if they chose to.
Saddam Hussein had the intention of having weapons of mass destruction, had weapons of mass destruction programs, had weapons which he had used in the past, and we believed he had every possibility of having such weapons in the present. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, weapons which he had used in the past, and we believed he had every possibility of having such weapons in the present. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, weapons which he had used in the past, and we believed he had every possibility of having such weapons in the present.
This became especially apparent to students during the review session at the end, and also helped create a flag of what the motivation of the specific piece might be. However, most of the students were not aware that some of the B-roll that was provided was actually not related to the war in Iraq, but was instead stock footage of Iran. Using these images on top of manipulated interviews, they were able to create compelling arguments of misrepresented information.
I really hope students took away from this project that context really matters. You can't just take something out of context and use it for whatever ends you want. You need to embed it in its context. How you tell someone's story really matters. And this video project really shows that because the results based on the groups are totally different. And so it really shows that, you know, you could support something or show something totally different. And especially in this current day in political context, you know, we know that data can be manipulated, news stories can be told in a certain way, and it can create falsehoods and partisanship. So it's really important. This video assignment shows them the responsibility they have in crafting their narrative.
After having used a version of this assignment in several cases, we've realized that an important component of the assignment is to have a conversation about information and media literacy and the ethical use of information. Please consider the joint learning outcomes recommended by Instructional Technology and the Libraries as a guide to consider incorporating one of these aspects into this assignment. Other considerations for improving the assignment or making it so that it was scalable for a range of different classes include changing the topic, modifying the pre-recorded content, or considering an alternative medium, such as an audio podcast.
I think this type of assignment could be developed to use in lots of different classes. I think there's a lot of faculty members that do podcasts, and I think there could be a similar assignment crafted for podcasts that doesn't use video but uses audio clips, and showing that you could take audio clips to, you know, manipulate a story to different ends and kind of get that same message across. I think it also might be good to have a newer, a more recent example of something that you could tell in multiple different ways, because then students would have their own knowledge about it to bring to the assignment.
The for against neutral assignment has typically been done as a single session flipped classroom assignment. In this sense, it's never focused on helping students become masters of video production or audio editing. Instead, it is our hope that students will think critically, creatively, and with complexity about what it means to create and consume information and media in their world today.
This kind of assignment really connects to a liberal arts education because it brings in lots of different skill sets and a sort of interdisciplinary approach to real life examples. That's what the liberal arts can do for us. It gives us all the ability to think critically and contextually about different things from all these different angles and then apply them to real life. So I think this is a really great example of how an assignment can teach students to do that. So it's a really valuable addition to the liberal arts.
The results of this prototype project were exciting, but also somewhat troubling. The students saw firsthand
In spring,
how easy it was for the message and the motives to change drastically from editor to editor, even though they had the exact same interview clips to work with. This is where our ability to partner with the librarians was especially valuable, as conversations about authority, accuracy, and the ethical use of information became immediately relevant to students who were seeing the repercussions unfold in front of them as they worked to identify the motives of their peer content producers. Once we had a test run of the assignment as part of Professor Block's class, we realized that there were benefits and drawbacks to the approach that we had used. As part of the instructional technology team, I realized that our use of preloaded video content on our portable hard drives made it possible for students to have less familiarity with the technical aspects of video production while still being able to quickly produce a video project. The pre-recorded clips, if collected ahead of time, allowed for flipped classroom model that could be accomplished in a single session or in a two-session assignment. To clarify, our flipped classroom approach would have classes reviewing a training video ahead of time and then using the class time as dedicated to the active learning activity of editing their video project together in the lab. This approach sped up the process that would otherwise be an entire in-person session dedicated to technical training, often moving at a specific pace, and would not be ideal for the variety of skill levels amongst students in the class. The flipped classroom approach allowed for the video tutorials to have closed captions and to be broken into chapters to improve the user experience and the on-demand convenience that ultimately benefits the learning outcomes of the course and the student experience. If the faculty member was able to introduce the assignment ahead of time, the entire exercise or assignment could be accomplished in a single open lab session. In the case of Professor Block's class, we were able to assign the project, edit the videos, and review them all within the 80-minute session. But this could possibly be scaled to a 60-minute session or two shorter sessions if need be. In the case of the for against neutral assignment, students are not expected to learn most video production techniques since they would only need to edit their project together. As a result, this shortened the training requirements and allowed for the upfront work collecting intentional clips for the purpose of this assignment to be designed and prepared well in advance of the class. As for the topic or theme of the assignment, we intentionally used pre-recorded clips from the Iraq War since we knew that students would be less familiar with the details of the war to prevent their own personal views or opinions from coming through when creating the video. Since the first attempt of the for against neutral assignment in spring of 2020, most of our plans to try the assignment as a video project were derailed or at least postponed by the COVID-19 pandemic. In fall of 2020, we adjusted the assignment and used it as a fully online audio podcast so that we could conduct the session during a course held via Zoom using the free audio editing software Audacity, and then work with the groups while they were in breakout sessions. Some of the takeaways to recap that we realized after doing the project as a video and as an audio podcast. So having the pre-recorded content loaded on hard drives or on OneDrive ahead of time noticeably sped up the process. Assigning groups their angles before reviewing pre-recorded content helped them identify clips that supported their argument. Reviewing videos or audio podcasts during the same session kept the momentum high and made it possible to do everything in a single session or two-shot class. Depending upon the relevance of the subject matter, context was needed on the topic. In our case, the Iraq War started over 18 years ago, and some of the students were not familiar with the history or the controversies of the time. We have discussed the possibility of using more recent news stories for this project, or possibly something unique to campus. Consider something specific to campus, or maybe not overtly political, as it could give a good topic for this type of project, as it would help students focus on the methods of selective editing rather than on the specifics of the topic. But the news coverage was also appropriate for the themes of some of the classes. If it is possible, it seemed that the conversations about the ethics of news coverage, journalism, and information literacy are needed as a resolve to the end of this exercise, possibly in the form of a reflection paper or group discussion. We played the videos and audio podcasts at the end of the class and had them guess the angle. In the case of the video project, this was especially interesting given the conversations that followed, but was less effective for the audio podcast for a first run. The audio podcast content would need to be given additional consideration to make the assignment more successful. In the one time that we tried it in fall of 2020, there was a noticeable difference in the methods used to stitch the ideas together without showing a clear motive. It was also less effective without the use of images and stock B-roll. So navigating the technology was also more difficult due to conducting the entire session via Zoom. But it's possible that the support process could be improved. We'd like to show you some of the examples from the original interview clip and what students were able to produce during a for against neutral session. You've already seen the clip of Colin Powell and the previous clip of the misleading Iran weapons footage that students were allowed to use as B-roll to support their angle before it was revealed at the end to be unrelated. But we wanted to also take time to show you the primary interview clip that students had access to. This is a 4-minute excerpt from a 2004 interview between NBC's Tom Brokaw and David Kay, head of the Iraq Survey Group, charged with finding weapons of mass destruction on behalf of the US and other allied countries at the time. This clip is approximately 4 minutes in length and is available courtesy of the Vanderbilt Television News Archive.
They describe an Iraq that was really spinning into a vortex of corruption from the very top, in which people were lying to Saddam, lying to each other for money, the graft, and how much you could get out of the system rather than how much you could produce was the dominant issue.
You found evidence of programs that were in place but no weapons.
There were a lot of small activities. Now, in the missile field is quite different. There were actually large, purposeful programs going on in that area. But in chemical, biological, and nuke, it was rudimentary.
David, as you know, the Vice President of the United States and Secretary of State Powell say, we still don't know the end result. We could still find these weapons.
Well, Tom, let me explain how I came to a different conclusion. If there are large stockpiles of weapons, there must have been a production process which required plants, required people, and it would have produced documentation. But we have seen nothing that would indicate large-scale production.
And no scientist who testified to that.
No scientists, no documentation, nor physical evidence of the production plants themselves.
And no workers, no managers of those kinds of plants.
That's absolutely true.
And what about intelligence from a CIA report reading Baghdad has chemical and biological weapons as well as missiles with ranges in excess of UN restrictions. If left unchecked, it probably will have a nuclear weapon during this decade.
Well, I think it's got elements that we've certainly seen are true. The area that is probably most seriously wrong in is in the nuclear area.
But as you know, the Vice President, and to a lesser degree the President of the United States, raised the nuclear threat as a reason that the United States had to go to war against Iraq.
I think the weight of the evidence was not great.
A lot of the President's political critics are going to say this is a clear evidence that he lied to the American people.
Well, Tom, if we do that, I think we're really hurting ourselves. Clearly, the intelligence that we went to war on was inaccurate, wrong. We need to understand why that was. I think if anyone was abused by the intelligence, it was the President of the United States, rather than the other way around.
The president described Iraq as a gathering threat, a gathering danger. Was that an accurate description?
I think that's a very accurate description.
But an imminent threat to the United States?
Tom, an imminent threat is a political judgment. It's not a technical judgment. I think Baghdad was actually becoming more dangerous in the last 2 years than even we realized. Saddam was not controlling the society any longer. In the marketplace of terrorism and of WMD, Iraq well could have been that supplier if the war had not intervened.
But as you know, the administration and its supporters not just suggest, but insist that there was a real connection between Saddam Hussein and terrorist organizations that would be a threat to the United States.
Look, I found no real connection between WMD and terrorists. What we did find, and as others are investigating, and we found a lot of terrorist groups and individuals that passed through Iraq.
There has been recently a report given to the Pentagon that there's the possibility, a strong possibility, of civil war breaking out in Iraq.
I think it's going to be very, very difficult in this political transition to avoid some degree of internal conflict, and it certainly could spin out of control to civil war.
Is this deja vu all over again? It looks very much like what the British went through when they went in there in 1918 and then finally gave up in the early 1930s.
Tom, there are times I thought this was deja vu all over again, not only with regard to that, but where I started out my life, which was in the Vietnam conflict and things. It is going to require a great deal of wisdom and perseverance to avoid that occurring.
Now that you've seen the full clip of the interview, I'll share with you the basic rules and expectations that are shown at the start of each session. The statement you are arguing is for, against, or neutral to the following claim. The U.S. invasion of Iraq was justified based on the threat of nuclear weapons. The simple rules given to the students are as follows. Each group is assigned an angle. Keep it secret. Edit with your group to create a video, 1 to 3 minutes in length. As editor, you can arrange the visuals and audio in any way you see fit, but you should only use simple cuts and edits. In other words, no adding effects, filters, or graphics. Try to get members of the class to guess which angle you have been assigned by selectively editing and rearranging clips and only using the provided content. We'll show you a couple examples of student-produced pieces. Each example was produced by approximately a 3-person group of students during a 30-minute edit session as part of an 80-minute class. See if you can identify the assigned angle of the students. Is it leaning for, against, or is it trying to appear neutral to the claim the US invasion of Iraq was justified based on the threat of nuclear weapons? The student-produced videos are approximately 1 minute each in length.
We still don't know the end result. We could still find these weapons.
Well, Tom, let me explain how I came to a different conclusion. If there are large stockpiles of weapons, there must have been a production process which required plants, required people, and it would have produced documentation. But we have seen nothing that would indicate large-scale production.
And no scientists who testified to that.
No scientists, no documentation, nor physical evidence of the production plants.
And no workers, no managers of those kinds of plants.
That's absolutely true. And I think we're really hurting ourselves. Clearly, the intelligence that we went to war on was inaccurate, wrong. We need to understand why that was. I think if anyone was abused by the intelligence, it was the President of the United States, rather than the other way around. Look, I found no real connection between WMD and terrorists. What we did find, and as others are investigating, and we found a lot of terrorist groups and individuals that passed through Iraq.
What angle did you guess? You're welcome to share your guess in the chat, but you don't have to answer. Try to remember it as we watch another example.
Becoming more dangerous in the last 2 years than even we realized. Saddam was not controlling the society any longer. In the marketplace of terrorism and of WMD, Iraq well could have been that supplier if the war had not intervened. An issue.
You found evidence of programs that were in place
CIA report reading Baghdad has chemical and biological weapons as well as missiles with ranges in excess of UN restrictions. If left unchecked, it probably will have a nuclear weapon during this decade.
Saddam Hussein had the intention of having weapons of mass destruction, had weapons of mass destruction programs, had weapons which he had used in the past, and we believed he had every possibility of having such weapons in the present.
We still don't know.
What angle did you guess? Feel welcome to post it in the chat. The first video was against, and the second video was for. But now I'll show you one final example, the tricky one, neutral.
The vice president, and to a lesser degree, the president of the United States, raised the nuclear threat as a reason that the United States had to go to war against Iraq. It described Iraq as a gathering threat, a gathering danger. Was that an accurate description?
I think that's a very accurate description.
But an imminent threat to the United States?
Tom, an imminent threat is a political judgment. It's not a technical judgment. I think Baghdad was actually becoming more dangerous in the last 2 years than even we realized. Saddam was not controlling the society any longer. In the marketplace of terrorism and of WMD, Iraq well could have been that supplier if the war had not intervened.
Saddam Hussein had the intention of having weapons of mass destruction, had weapons of mass destruction programs, had weapons which he had used in the past, and we believed he had every possibility of having such weapons in the present.
Look, I found no real connection between WMD and terrorists. What we did find, and as others are investigating, and we found a lot of terrorist groups and individuals that passed through Iraq.
One of the major questions that comes up by design is, how do you get your peers to guess that your angle is neutral? After showing each example of the students, we would ask them to guess and then reveal their angle, and to have the student producers explain the rationale for some of their edit decisions. For and against are relatively straightforward. Find things that support your angle and avoid or manipulate things that oppose your angle. If students were assigned for or against, and they did a good job of editing, most of the class could guess the angle of their piece, though some might suggest it was neutral if it did not fully remove the counter-argument. Though troubling to witness, this form of selective editing is effective and somewhat predictable when arguing for or against a topic. But how do you get a class of students to guess your angle is neutral? This was a more complex conversation, since there are usually several approaches identified and attempted by the student groups. These three methods include balancing opposing views, or in other words, giving them both sides similar amount of time, number of claims, or number of points versus counterpoints. Number two, avoiding declarative clips. This method was an attempt to rely on seemingly objective facts rather than seemingly subjective claims or opinions. And finally, editing within a larger context. This approach relied on a longer form editing, or essentially less editing, with the attempt to keep the integrity and authenticity of the original source content. There are practical and ethical considerations to each of these approaches that we've outlined. And to avoid students walking away from this assignment feeling discouraged or even cynical, we recommend considering a follow-up class conversation or reflection activity to this type of session. In our case, it has typically been at the discretion of the faculty member who is leading the course. This work started with one video class exercise in February of 2020. The following month brought the start of the pandemic and prevented most classes from meeting in person. And since our video version of the For Against Neutral assignment required in-person use of our IMAX for the sake of the way that we had designed the assignment, we did not pursue growing the number of classes using the assignment until the start of this past academic year. By means of faculty recruitment and librarians and instructional technologists, we were able to conduct 5 For Against Neutral sessions in the fall semester of 2021. And by word of mouth and conversations with faculty, we currently have at least 10 separate classes signed up for this semester in spring of 2022. The first class we worked with was a sociology class, which has continued for this year as well. Some of the other departments and classes we have worked with include integrations 100 and 200 level courses, English 100 level courses, history 200 level courses, communication 100, 200, and 300 level courses. And as I mentioned before, our pilot partnership, a sociology class, a 300 level course. From a variety of departments and majors, these courses have a range of themes and focuses, including our learning foundation courses, argumentation and advocacy, transnational anthropology, listening for justice, public speaking, narrative identities, and several others. Our hope for the future is to continue scaling this type of work so that we can reach more classes and a wider range of interdisciplinary academic departments. We hope to design additional assignments in which the collaboration between librarians and instructional technologists can enhance student learning. And ultimately, we hope to find more innovative and meaningful ways to advance our shared mission of fostering information and media literacy in our classrooms, on our campuses, and in our communities.
During the last few years, librarians and instructional technologists have been working together. Recently, we worked together to create learning outcomes that were once originally designed for librarians to use when discussing assignments with faculty, but now include media components and are used by both librarians and instructional technologists. We have been assessing media projects for 3 or 4 semesters now by using a rubric that reflects our combined learning outcomes. Our learning sequences that outline what is involved with the video podcast, 3D, as well as other media projects were developed in 2019 to help guide discussions between faculty, librarians, and instructional technologists. In 2019, Ethan and I, as well as 2 of our other colleagues, won the Minnesota Library Innovator Award for our work in creating these sequences. As we move forward, we are constantly looking at ways to incorporate new technology into our classrooms, whether it be for library instructions or media projects. We have developed great relationships amongst each other. We now work together to go into departmental meetings to discuss what we can help their students create using various technology. Ethan and I continue to work together to develop assignments that we can use in any academic departments, whether it be accounting or theology. Thank you for taking time to come to our presentation. If you have any questions, please use chat or raise your hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and Ethan. Does anyone have any questions?
I see we have one here mentioning the rubrics at the end via the method or others. Can you say anything about what students think coming out of the sessions? Sarah, you mentioned that at the end? Do you want to start? Otherwise, I can chime in too.
Yeah, we developed the rubrics because of that lack of information literacy. Students weren't citing their references, they weren't understanding copyright, intellectual property rights. So with that, students do see the rubrics as well as anything that their faculty may have developed. And so students walk away knowing a new technology, as one of the goals, but also understanding how to critically think about sources, even though it might not be on paper, but it's used in media, video projects, audio, anything like that, that it doesn't matter the format, the information still needs to be credible and you still need to cite that information. Ethan, what would you want to add to that?
That I would say that the single sessions that we've been working on trying to develop are the two-shot sessions, were in some respects meant to be kind of an exposure to or an introduction to hopefully a larger project or conversation. The rubric specifically was designed for a lot of our larger assignments. This specific assignment, and you mentioned too here that the for and against, for example, are easier and don't require deeper thinking to identify. It's actually part of the reason why we would think that this does make more sense as as sort of an exercise or a session rather than a graded assignment. Their participation in the conversation, the participation in perhaps the reflection activity that could happen after the fact is, I think, honestly, where the critical thinking often comes into play. The students who are handed that neutral card are often groaning because they know that it's going to be more challenging to try and get a group of students to guess that they are, in fact, trying to either balance it out or report in a way that has a larger context. But honestly, I think that the conversations that come out of that is often what maybe can lead to a larger assignment or a way for that rubric to ultimately hit those assignments that are designed with a little bit more of a robust level of expectations rather than a single shot session. This is more than anything meant to be, I think, a conversation starter.
I do think, in regards to the next question, do they help them think critically about media? I hope it helps them think critically to everything that they're using, whether it's media or print sources or, websites, whatever it might be. And you do see, the wheels kind of working with our students at the end of it when we're having that conversation of, why is this important? Why do we have you do this? Was it to teach you how to manipulate things, or is there a bigger purpose here? And through those conversations, yeah, you could tell that they're getting that they need to start really critically looking at things, but also looking at it from multiple points of views and not just relying, like I said before, on like one source.
We had some great conversations with students in the early times that we tried this. I remember one of the classes ended with one of the students asking about the legality of this. They said this has to be illegal, right? You can't just chop things up and change their meaning. If they said something completely different, it has to be illegal, like you're changing what they're saying. And we had to cut it off there. And our hope is that we can kind of expand some of this a little bit so that there is that ability to keep that conversation going, so that it doesn't turn into a student feeling cynical about what they're witnessing. But in the same time, the creation of content, and I see this a lot, especially with the students I get a chance to work with, students who have a hand in understanding the creation of content consume it differently. They think more about what they're seeing because they they either wonder or they know how easily things can be manipulated. There was a fantastic piece that actually we used to pitch even this assignment that I believe Minnesota Public Radio had done about where are the deep fakes in reference to during the last election cycle. And part of it boiled down to a simple reality that selective editing is easier and still very, very effective. And the fact that those students with the same exact short interview context could have such a prominent voice simply in the way that they would choose to selectively move and rearrange that information shows how much of a voice that a silent editor has in that moment.
And as far as we know, maybe Bennett knows, or I'm sorry, Ethan knows differently. I don't know of any other schools that are doing projects that are similar to what we've been doing.
We haven't seen anything. The earliest conversation about even attempting this was resembling what other debate type assignments might look like, where you're arguing for or against something. Intelligence Squared kind of comes to mind, where there's sort of a gamification to it. But this was a little different in part because we pondered what it might be to have a group's attempt to remain neutral, to remain a control group. And I think in some respects that might be why the assignment is getting some traction amongst the faculty that we're working with, is that it's not a debate assignment. It's actually a little bit more complex. But I haven't seen, I don't think, Sarah, I don't think we've seen something exactly like it. I wouldn't doubt, just based on kind of the simplicity of it, I wouldn't doubt that there are others that are doing something similar. We should see if we can find something.
All right, thank you. Any final questions or comments?
I'll say, as someone who's a little on the peripheries to maybe the librarian kind of community, that I'm really excited to see how what might otherwise be sort of a technology field trip, if it was just simply run by me, like what could quickly turn into a little bit of a experiment in media technology, instead has a much more robust set of conversations around it, surrounding information and media literacy. And it has everything to do with the fact that we have a partnership with our librarians. And that, to me, has been one of the most gratifying moments in my professional career, is being able to partner with librarians to create this type of work.
That's fantastic. All right, well, thank you so much. I guess if any questions bubble up, you can contact Sarah and Ethan directly. And again, thank you so much for sharing. It's much appreciated, and what a fascinating and interesting assignment for students. So thanks again. Everyone have a great afternoon.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
for having
for
us.
giving us this time. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.